John chapter 9. Let's begin reading with the first verse. As Jesus passed by, he saw a man which was blind from his birth, and his disciples asked him, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, Neither hath this man sinned nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day. The night cometh when no man can work. As long as I'm in the world, I'm in the light of the world. Now Jesus and his disciples, just to get the thought here, they're walking along and they come across a tragic situation. A terrible, a tragic, a bad situation. They come across a man who was born blind. Now this is chapter 9 of John. That means we've had 9 chapters up till now of Jesus and his disciples, and they've been seeing him do miracles for 9 chapters now. And I guess they've gotten used to the fact that they're walking around with miracle-working Jesus. So now in their minds, they're moving on to some deeper things, and they're trying to think through all the theology of why did it happen. See, they're trying to analyze. They see a tragic situation, a bad situation, and the first thing they think is, why did it happen? And I think really, actually, that's very human. It's very human of us. That's oftentimes the first thing we think. If something bad occurs in proximity to us or to us, if we're not, if we don't make up our minds not to, if we're not careful, we start thinking about, what did I do to cause this? Sometimes people will say that. What did I do to deserve this? And what Jesus is answering here, when the disciples, look at what they say in verse 2. Elliot, if you'd go back to verse 2, the disciples asked him, saying, Master, who sinned? So what's on their mind is somebody must have sinned here. See, that this must have happened because someone sinned. Who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Now, in a way, I could understand maybe how they might have said, did his parents sin and therefore he was born blind? I can see a kind of a sense there, but this doesn't make any sense to me. Who sinned this man? I mean, what kind of thinking is that? How did he sin before he was born? That's a little too deep for me. But what the disciples are thinking, somebody must have done something wrong to cause this to happen. And really what Jesus is answering when he says in verse 3, Neither hath this man sinned nor his parents. Jesus does not mean to imply that this man was a perfect man and had never sinned, or that the parents were perfect and had never sinned. What he's saying is it didn't have anything to do with it. That's what he's saying. He's not saying that they are sinless and perfect. The two singular occasions of perfect people on the earth. What he's saying is, when he says, Neither hath this man sinned nor his parents, he's saying, this has got nothing to do with the fact that he was born blind. You're thinking down the wrong track here. And then he says that the works of God should be made manifest in him, turning their attention away from who sinned and away from a sin hunt to, let's look and see how God can work in his life. Now some people, a casual reader of the Bible might look at this, and I've heard people say this, well, God caused him to be born blind so Jesus could come and heal him. It's like God's going to pitch a softball and then Jesus can hit it. But see, that makes God out doing bad things so Jesus can come and undo them. And really what that does is that makes Jesus coming along and undoing the works of God, which that doesn't make any sense either. But what Jesus is really what he's getting at here is, you disciples, you're on the wrong track. You're thinking about this all wrong. You want to blame him or blame his parents or find someone to blame about it. And really, let's forget about that and let's just think about what God can do. He said, I've come not to point out people's sin, but to do the works of God. Jesus isn't here to ruminate about why a bad thing happened, but to make a bad thing better. Did you hear that? Jesus doesn't come along just to point fingers and say, and not at all to point fingers. He wants to make the bad things better. And the reason I'm saying that is, in our lives, things can happen. Things come along in life. And, it's not God doing bad things, but bad things happen in life. Sometimes people can do some dumb things. Hello? And we can be touched by the ramifications of that. Listen, I've done some dumb things. Have you? And I know, listen, this is how my mind thinks. I know if I've done some dumb things, that means somebody else might do some. That means we could have a whole world full of people doing dumb things. And we could all be suffering the results of that. And that doesn't mean God's to blame. But what Jesus is saying here is, it doesn't make any difference how it got this way. All that matters is, what can God do about it right now? Now, having read that to you and said that to you, let me read you this from the Message translation, beginning in verse 1. I'm a big fan of the Message translation. Really, to tell you the truth, I'm a big fan of all the translations. I like them all. I've got a whole bunch in my office. And you know what I like to do when I have time to study? I like to get all the different Bibles I can, just lay them out on a table. And when I'm studying a passage, just read it from the King James. That's my kind of main Bible. But then I say, well, I wonder what this one says. I'm just curious, Just call me Mr. Curious. I just want to know what everybody's take on it. And I like the Message translation because the man that made it, Eugene H. Peterson, he was a Presbyterian minister and taught the Bible for many years out of standard, King James or RSV or whatever. He taught the Bible for many years, and he found himself spending a lot of time explaining what the text was saying, and he got the idea, why don't I just make my own translation and just explain it the way I would explain it, rather than, to save a step here. So let me just read you what he has to say here. John chapter 9, I really like this. In the Message. Walking down the street, Jesus saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, causing him to be born blind? Now, I like the answer that Jesus gives. Jesus said, you're asking the wrong question. You're looking for someone to blame. Now, that's really good. It's possible in life to ask the wrong question, and to get off on the wrong track by asking the wrong question. And the wrong question was, who's to blame here? There's no such cause and effect here. Look instead for what God can do. In other words, instead of trying to figure out who caused it or what caused it, really at this point it doesn't make any difference, does it? I'm sure there's an answer to why he was born blind. You might be able to trace through his DNA, and his parents and all the, and the different things in the family history, or you might find some supernatural influence, who knows what. But, really none of that makes any difference. Here he is blind. What can God do right now? You see, when we're faced with difficult situations, how it got that way really isn't an issue. Because here it is. Here we are with the reality. But here's what really does matter. We have a God who's on our side, who can change things, who can intervene, who can fix things, who can make things better, who can help us in our difficult situations. Look instead for what God can do. We need to be energetically at work for the one who sent me, working while the sun shines. When the night falls, the workday is over. For as long as I'm in the world, there's plenty of light. I'm the world's light. And in other words, what he's saying through all that is, okay, disciples, instead of wasting our time trying to figure out what's wrong here, let's get to work. And then get to work means start in on doing what God wants to do about the situation. Now I want to go back to the King James and read what Jesus actually does here in verse 6. In verse 6, going back to the King James, when he had thus spoken, he spat on the ground and made clay of the spittle, and he anointed the eyes of the blind with the clay. Now, this is the King James translation. It's very polite language when it says he made clay and he anointed his eyes. That sounds very wholesome and nice, but really he spit on the ground and made mud, and he smeared mud on this man's eyes. When it says he anointed him, that sounds very nice and something we might do in church, with a bottle of oil or something. Really, this is really kind of a crude thing that Jesus did. He spit on the ground and he got down and made mud out of it, and he put this mud on the man's eyes. Well, what did he do that for? I'm sure this man was thinking, what are you doing this for? Is this going to help me, Jesus? But Jesus knows what he's doing, and he put this mud on the man's eyes, and then he said, verse 7, go and wash in the pool of Siloam, which is by interpretation sent. In other words, I'm sending you to a place that's called sent. I'm sending you with a task, and my task for you, this man, listen to this, he was born blind. So this condition has been in his life for a long, long time. Is that right? No telling. I don't know, did it say how old he was? I don't think so. But this is a long-standing, this man, in other words, has become used to this situation. It's become commonplace for him. But Jesus now has intervened, and he puts mud on his eyes. Now he sends him to a place called Sent, and he says, now here's what I want you to do. Now listen carefully. I want you to go and wash it off. Hello? I want you to go and wash this thing off. Now the man could have said, oh, what's the use? Now on top of being blind, now I got mud in my eyes. You just, what next? What are you going to do next? Maybe make me, I don't know. What else he going to do? He puts mud on my eyes. No, but Jesus sent him there for a purpose. He went his way, therefore, and washed and came seeing. Now, I think this is very important. I think the important implication here is he asked this man to do something with the end result that he, the man himself, went and, in effect, washed away what was there before.